Welcome back to another episode of RMLD's Current Insights. This is a podcast where we have a special guest each session, and we talk about vital issues or things that affect RMLD, and more importantly, how we take care of our customers. We serve 4 communities, Linfield Center and North Reading, Reading, and Wilmington. And as usual, I'm your host today. My name is Greg Phipps. And today we have a special guest. We're going to be talking about solar, and Tom Ollila, who is an integrated resources engineer at RMLD, is going to be part of our conversation. So Tom, as we normally do in the very beginning, just so our audience can get a sense of who you are, tell us just a little bit about yourself. How did you tell us about your role at RMLD, and how did you end up there?
Thanks, Greg. I'd be glad to do that. I've been an employee at RMLD for about 10 years.
Yeah.
However, I moved to Wilmington shortly after I got married, and I've raised my family here. So I've actually been an RMLD customer for almost 40 years.
Oh, wow.
So I'm quite familiar with Reading Light, and I have thoroughly enjoyed my time here as an employee. My title is Integrated Resource Engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So in that role, my primary responsibility is acting as a key account manager for our largest commercial, industrial, and municipal customers.
Exactly.
I also act as a project manager for special projects, such as acquiring and managing large assets like engine generators, backup generators, and energy storage assets such as batteries.
Yep.
These are typically located at our substations. But I do also work quite a bit with our residential customers, primarily through setting up and managing our energy efficiency programs, such as rebates for heat pumps, EV chargers, and solar panel systems, which will be the focus of today's discussion.
Yeah.
You were also on our Citizens Advisory Board, right, before you started working here.
Exactly,
so,
yeah. Before I became an employee, I served as a volunteer representing Wilmington at the Light Board, and I did that for probably 3 or 4 years. I really got to know the organization and the managers, and at one point it made sense to join full-time. Why not?
Be part of the team, yeah.
So it's been a very good adventure.
It has been, Tom, and I think I've both as a RMLD fellow employee, but also supplier to RMLD. I think I've known you for almost all those 10 years here. So
it's true. You were one of the first people I met there. You're right.
That's exactly right. I remember making those in your key account role. We met with we met with most of the top 20, I think, early on, which was kind of fun for both of us. But today we're going to talk mainly about solar, Tom, as you mentioned. And so if we think about primarily from the residential, but the industrial, commercial side as well, as they think about solar, what are some of the factors that they should consider as they contemplate the possibility of putting solar on their premises?
Probably the top 3 factors to consider is, first of all, your longer-term plans for the home. If there's any likelihood that you might move away in the next 2 or 3 years, it probably doesn't make sense because it's a longer-term investment in the home. So that's certainly an issue. Second thing is probably the roof, the condition of the roof, the actual shingles on the roof.
Yep.
If they're more than, say, 12 or 15 years old, they probably should be replaced first and then install the solar, because both of those products, the shingles and the solar panels, are typically warranted for 25 or 30 years. So
or longer.
Ideally, you want to do them together.
Yeah, and before you get to the other one, Tom, I think the other thing for people to remember is that the solar panels sit on brackets, but they sit on top of the shingles.
Right.
They don't replace the shingles for the most part. Right?
Correct.
There are some.
In fact, there's a lot of evidence that they actually protect the shingles, so they'll extend the life of the panels, the shingles directly under them. Yeah. But so that's a big condition. Probably the last thing is the orientation of the house.
Mm-hmm.
For solar panels, for optimal performance, you want the panel facing directly south. So if you think of the points of a compass from 0 to 360 degrees, 180 degrees is straight south. So that's perfect. But even facing directly east or west still works pretty well, and that's what you strive for. And then the other issue is shading. If you have any large trees that could potentially cast a shadow on the roof or on the solar panels, that's not optimal.
Yeah, because the way solar panels work is the sun shines on the panel, and then there's a reaction that generates electricity. So if they're in the shade, not as much generation. Going back to the orientation, Tom. So it sounds like what you're saying is, large expanses, ideally south, but you mentioned if the primary ridge line is north and south, right, then you've got a panel on both the east and west side, and that works pretty well too. It sounds like.
Absolutely, that can work just fine. So what happens is the panels on the east side would get the morning sun, and the panels on the west side would get the afternoon sun. So between the two, neither one is getting max sun all day, but between the two, it's still a very viable situation. And most homes are some mix of that. So, so that's what you end up with. And that's one thing that the solar contractors can really optimize is early on in the process, they'll analyze your home and figure out what's the best configuration for your particular roof. And in some cases, they might recommend removing a tree or two to improve the performance, but that's a case by case.
Yep. Every lot's different. Every house is a little bit different. Yeah.
So can I just ask a question about trees? So what if there's like a younger tree? Like, do they recommend as the tree grows, is there maintenance that comes along with trees?
That's certainly a personal decision that you have to do that trade-off. Certainly having trees that cast a nice shadow over your roof in the summertime is good in that it keeps your roof and your home cooler in the summer. So that's a positive thing. But if you put solar panels in there, it's a trade-off between the two, and most cases arrive at some. In fact, I'm going to talk about my solar system on my home, and we have a large maple tree in the back that casts great shade over our deck and part of the house, and that's worth more to me to have the shade than to increase the performance of the system.
Trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
Depending upon your individual situation and what you as a homeowner value.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Tom, it sounds like, you kind of sets up a discussion we should talk about the experts, solar installers, et cetera, coming in and making recommendations. But, MLPs, municipal light plants like RMLD, they're a little bit different. The incentive structure is a little bit different. The rates are significantly lower. But there seems to be a lot of misinformation about people installing or not installing in MLP territory. So, just talk a little bit about, what's really happening, because it seems like there's a lot of misinformation running around, and help us clarify.
Yes, unfortunately, you're right. There are a number of very large solar companies that operate across the whole United States. So several of them have a sales policy that sort of is all structured around one size fits all. So they have a generic approach that they take to every home, no matter if it's in Arizona or
Maine,
New Hampshire. It doesn't really matter. So, and because of that, because it's such geared toward high volume, they really only focus on the largest utilities, the national grids and the Eversources. And to operate with very small, in their eyes, municipal utilities like Reading Light, they just choose not to. However, where the confusion comes in is some of their sales folks have come up with strategies that, to them, it's easier to just say, Reading Light doesn't allow solar. So that just ends the conversation.
Right.
They don't explain the details of that's not in their business plan.
As opposed to saying that we don't work in that territory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But clearly that's not true. We encourage solar, and we support it in a lot of ways that we'll talk about.
We'll talk about that,
And I'm glad you said that, because when we're at community events, I will have a lot of people come up to me and say, why don't you allow solar in our
Yes.
territory? So it really is rampant, that
It is. There's a lot
misinformation.
of that out there.
A lot of miscommunication. So for those that actually want to explore the concept of putting solar on their roof, Tom, kind of walk us through, just big picture, the steps that they'd go through in terms of considering and maybe deciding to put solar on their roof. But how do they get started? What should they expect?
Sure. Probably if we were to boil it down, probably the top 5 steps, the basic steps in the process. The first is to solicit proposals from a number of solar contractors or installers. And we recommend, because it is a large, it can save you money, but it is a large upfront investment. So you want to get a range of proposals to pick from, like buying any large purchase, a car or a house. You don't just buy the first thing that comes along. So we recommend getting 3 or 4 of those quotes. And if you're not familiar, Reading Light, we can provide you with with lists of 8 or 10 companies that have worked in our territory before. It's not required that you use anyone from our list, and we're not mandating who to buy from.
We're not making recommendations.
Exactly.
Just people that have experience.
Any product you can decide on your own and decide what makes sense for you.
It's a good starting point.
But yeah, that at least gives you several to choose from. The second step is to review the proposals once you have a few in hand, and really, again, like buying any large purchase, what's the cost? What are the benefits? And how does their proposal fit in with your longer-term plan, timing, savings, et cetera? And then step 3 is if you're decided on going ahead and you want to do the project, sign a contract with your chosen contractor. And then from that point, fortunately for the homeowner, the contractor really does the bulk of the work, the heavy lifting. It's their responsibility to obtain any permits required from the town, as well as submit a design package to us, to Reading Light, which is reviewed by our engineering folks to make sure it complies with all of the safety and performance requirements.
Safety being the critical piece.
Yes, absolutely.
Very good, yep.
So, and step 4 would be after RMLD approves their plan.
Yep.
We give the contractor approval to install a system. So from there on, the contractor coordinates the inspections of the system and permission to operate letter from us once it's all done, and that's really the process. Then 5, the last step in the process is really just wrapping up the documentation to apply for and obtain the rebate from us, which is a substantial part of the savings. And then after that, once all that documentation is submitted and approved, Reading Light cuts a check to that customer, and they're off and running and making their own solar power.
Exactly. Hey, Tom, I want to just because you talked about incentives, et cetera, I want to just change the order of the topics we want to talk about just a little bit. But on the incentives, since you mentioned it in a moment, and then we'll get back to your experiences. But just if you could highlight for our viewers and our listeners, what sort of incentives do we have in place for residential and businesses from a solar incentive perspective?
Yes, the program we have now is structured around a one-time payment, which is calculated at $1,200 per kilowatt. Kilowatt is the nameplate power rating of the system. If you see the rectangular panels on a roof, the typical solar panel, those are nowadays around 400 watts.
Yep, 400 watts per panel. Yep.
Per panel. So basically, every 2.5 panels, Reading is contributing $1,000 toward the project.
Yep.
And that works out to about a third of the project cost typically. And then the federal government kicks in another third as a discount as a credit on your federal taxes. So as a homeowner, it is still a significant investment, but you're really only paying about a third of the actual cost of the system.
As you mentioned, significant, but those incentives are in place. Now, as you know, Tom, and just to share with our group, we collect dollars from our customers for the efficiency fund. and electrification. We call it EEC, but it's a small number. It's either 4/10 or now it'll soon be half a cent a kilowatt hour. And we try and manage those to maximize the benefit to our customers. So we're in the process of reshuffling how we use those dollars, the customer dollars. We give them back to the customers, obviously, through these incentive programs. But just let our audience know that we're making some changes to the solar one in particular.
Yes, we've recently decided that the incentive that we pay as of March 1st, so in a month and a half or so, we are going to reduce the amount of the solar rebate from, it has been $1,200 per kilowatt for the past 2 or 3 years. We're cutting that in half to $600. So it has been pretty much the highest solar rebate in the state. But even at half of that, at the new amount, it's still
significant.
Still one of the best in the state. So it still makes these projects worth doing.
Yeah, at least considering, absolutely.
But especially since the federal 30% has kicked in, that kind of makes up the difference.
Exactly, right.
So,
Yep.
that's we just felt that was better use of our efficiency program dollars, is to take some of that money that was going to the solar panels and use it on some of our other programs like heat pumps or electric vehicle chargers.
And the other thing we're looking at, just so our audience knows, is modifying or increasing our weatherization program.
Yes.
So we, again, always trying to encourage the customers to encourage them to be to electrify, but also to be as energy efficient as possible. And weatherization comes into the efficiency piece. So Tom, jumping back to the your experiences, right? So, as Julie mentioned earlier, right? You have been on. You mentioned, right? You've been a customer for many decades, Citizen Advisory Board, part of the RMLD team. But you put the expression, put your money where your mouth is. So you actually you've done a few things, right? One is solar and air source heat pumps. But talk about the solar experience you had.
You're an model customer. Right here.
Exactly. Yes, my home. The engineers at work do tease me a bit that my home is like a trial balloon.
Yeah, trial balloon. Yeah.
And I'm proud and happy to say that now it's a fully electric house. All of the heating and cooling is electric through heat pumps.
Yep.
I just bought an electric vehicle, so I'm
you did?
I'm charging my car with electricity. And as of a year ago, we just finished the first year of the operation of our solar system.
Yeah, that's right. Been about a year. Okay.
So that doesn't cover our full load, but it takes a good chunk. It probably saves around 30% of my electric bill.
Good.
So that works out to roughly $600-700 a year. So it's definitely a nice payback, and considering my out-of-pocket cost for that system was only around $8,000.
Out of a total system
cost, the total system was $28,000.
Wow, that's
so my portion should be recovered in 10 or 12 years.
Yep.
So if you think of the simple payback period, that is typical. Depending, there's a lot of variables, but typically it's in that range. Anywhere from 8 to 12 years is very common.
And then you mentioned you have air source heat pumps in your house as well. And so you've got actually a couple of years of experience of air source heat pumps.
Yes, the heat pumps have been in a while. I haven't purchased oil in probably 4 years, so that's a good thing.
Oh, pretty exciting, Tom. I'm glad, as we say, right? Hey, I think these programs are good. I'm going to try them myself. And as a Wilmington resident, and an RMLD customer, you get to do that.
We always look at Tom's bills for analyses or guinea pig.
You could be like this.
Yeah.
So, Tom, we talk about solar, and I think that gives our audience some good perspective. We often look and consider storage, battery storage, energy storage systems. Just talk a little bit about that. I know it's an evolving technology, but just share some of our experiences so far.
Yes, batteries can definitely improve the monthly savings for a solar system, and the reason that happens is obviously solar isn't 24 hours a day, so you still need to power your home in the dark at night. So one way to do that is to oversize the solar panels so that any extra power they produce during the day gets stored in a battery, which is in your basement or your garage.
Yep.
And then that night, the energy from the battery powers the rest of the house. So that's the concept.
That's
and
the
it works very well. And we have probably 25 or 30 homes with both solar and batteries in our territory. So it definitely can be effective. However, the batteries prices are improving, but it's still an expensive addition.
Yeah. I think that you bring up a good point, Tom. Right? There's the convenience, there's the environmental aspect, but from the economic perspective, part of the good reason or part of the benefits of being an RMLD customer, our cost of energy, our rates, the average monthly bill are very low. And in this case, whether it's a storage system or a solar system, and they're both different, as you've mentioned, but they're basically displacing buying power from RMLD. And if it's already low, it's just a longer, as you say, longer payback period. Yeah.
In fact, that goes back to the misinformation issue of the large companies.
Go ahead.
Actually, it's more difficult for them to sell in our territory because our electric rates are low to begin with.
Exactly.
So if you're in an IOU territory and paying twice as much, you have more potential savings. So it's a trade-off that there's less to save to begin with, but they're paying twice as much for all their power they're using.
That's correct.
So that's a benefit. But
go ahead.
The batteries are definitely good, and they can improve your savings month to month by preventing your system from exporting power back onto the grid. That we give the customer credit for that, but it's at a reduced amount. So if you get the best bang for your buck by using all of the solar power you generate within your own home, not selling it back to us per se.
Yep.
But however, because the batteries are still so expensive, it really can add another $10,000 or $15,000 to the price, and just doesn't pay for itself in a reasonable time frame.
Yeah. And it goes back to your comment you made earlier. What's the time horizon?
Yeah.
And batteries tend to extend it out because they're expensive, and they're displacing, relatively speaking, inexpensive energy from
Exactly,
RMLD.
it does. And one additional benefit, however, is that if you have batteries in your system, if there's a grid outage, like unfortunately over the last couple of days we had some outages in Wilmington because of the storm.
Yep.
If you have batteries as part of your system, your house keeps on going as long as there's solar energy in your battery. So it gives you the ability to run in an off-grid mode. Whereas if you only have solar panels, unfortunately, if our grid goes out, you go out, even though the panels are there.
Yeah, just that's a electrical safety connection perspective.
Yes.
Not to get into the details with our customers right now or the audience, but again, it's all about safety for our customers and the RMLD team. So, Tom, it sounds like the program's been pretty successful, right? You've got a good experience, but kind of going to the topic of how many solar installations do we have in our territory? Kind of order of magnitude. How big of a program is it? And we've talked about the payback period takes a little bit of time because our rates are low, but there's still systems out there. So how many? Roughly?
Believe it or not, some customers have had these in our territory for 10, 15 years. So it's been a long time coming, but the rate that they're being added has definitely ramped up quite a bit. So right now we have around 250, 280 systems in our territory total on residential homes.
Yeah.
And then another 20 or 25 commercial buildings with larger systems on their roofs. And for the past few years, we've seen steady growth that every year we add another 40 or 50 homes. So it's about a 20% increase
each year
in the amount
That's
of
a pretty
homes.
significant number. Yeah.
We add all of those solar, mini solar generators up. It equates to about 10 megawatts of power, which is getting to be substantial, considering our peak load is around 150 or so. So
150,
it's
170 depending upon the year, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah, exactly right.
So can I just piggyback off of a point that you made? So you said that we've had some customers that have had them for 10, 15 years. So when it comes time to replace those solar panels, is the investment less if you already have solar panels and are replacing them as opposed to getting a brand new system?
You could reuse some of the supply equipment, the inverters and the wiring, but like any product, if it's 20 or 30 years, it's probably not the latest and greatest, and in most cases, they pretty much recycle that equipment and install new equipment because software changes, efficiencies do improve.
Connections.
Have we seen that yet, where people are replacing?
Yeah, we've seen that where they're replacing existing systems. More commonly, someone will put solar panels on one portion of their home, and then they'll put an addition on, and they'll come back and add additional panels to that same system, or they'll put up a barn or a garage and want to add more to it. So we've seen a few of those.
We've seen a few of those. Tom, this has been a great discussion. I think the audience has learned quite a bit about how we look at solar at RMLD. If they want to learn more, they should call the main number. They'll eventually probably get connected to you or part of the IRD team, but I think it's been helpful. And we're going to shift gears here to the portion of our session. This is the mailbag.
Yes.
And Julie, I'm going to let you do the mailbag.
Sure.
Yeah,
so
please.
just one before we close the book on solar here. We've done webinars on solar too, so
Yes.
customers can look on our website and get more in-depth information. And we're also in the process of adding solar case studies to our website, so those are helpful as well. So we have a wealth of resources beyond the wonderful information that Tom was able to share with us. Okay. So back to the mailbag. Typically, we look at emails that our customers send us, and we ask those questions, but our mailbag has been a little light. So this is a call to our customers to send us. Some of the questions have been redundant and answered in various discussions. So I thought it would be fun to ask a fun personal question instead of something from we think it's fun. Let's see if you think it's fun. So our question for you, Tom, outside of your work at RMLD, what is a hobby or activity you're passionate about, and how do you think it's influenced your professional life, if at all?
Outside of RMLD, I can't imagine
if
that.
If there's anything.
No, that's an easy one. I've always played a lot of tennis. Tennis is kind of my thing, and over the years I played a lot competitively and socially, and it's a very social game, like golf and other activities. But through the tennis community, I've definitely met a lot of people who have become very close friends, and some of them are actually very close professional connections that started out as tennis but ended up working for them or with them or helping them out from a professional level. So that is definitely a big part of my life and my wife, and hopefully my grandkids will take up that as well.
And you do talk shop at tennis because you'll say that your tennis friend was talking about his EV charging rate.
Oh, yeah,
so it's not all fun.
I'm pushing the electric way hard on them. They're sick of hearing about EV chargers and heat pumps.
They're coming.
They are. They really are. They're really here. So we have our challenges in front of us as that means more load on Reading Light, but I think we have a good team in place that is well positioned to continue to provide that economically and efficiently, and even through these storms.
Exactly right. Well, we're wrapping up another session of our Current Insights podcast. Julie and I are glad that you were, Tom, that you were able to join us today. I think it was an insightful discussion of solar and also a little bit about Tom.
Okay.
So, pleasure.
Thank you very much for
having
me. Appreciate it.
Thank
Very
you,
good.
Tom.